Excellent. Thank you, Mindy. Let me get back to the first slide here. How was everyone today?
Great.
Who likes mold? Nobody? No real estate agents like mold. I see some thumbs down over there.
You do.
Yes, I do. So we're going to be talking about mold today. We're going to cover some common misconceptions about it. And we're going to talk about some cases where we've seen mold in some properties. And then we're going to talk about some innovative technology that's out there to help solve the mold issue in your transactions. So one of the biggest misconceptions about mold is mold and mildew. And sometimes when our inspectors are on inspections, a real estate agent will say, "Oh, don't worry, clients, that's just mildew." Now, what we want to always do in the real estate transaction is we never want the real estate agent to go into diagnosis. And what I mean by that is you never want to take the real estate agent hat off. So as soon as you say the words mold or mildew in a transaction, what have you now become? You've now become a licensed toxicologist. Now, if you talk to any licensed toxicologist, one of the big misconceptions is the difference between mold and mildew. Mildew only grows on living plants. So if you have a plant and it's got that fuzzy white stuff on it, that would be considered mildew. Mildew relies on certain enzymes only found in living plants. So why do people sometimes in their bathroom, why do they call that mildew? They don't know. There's actually something called the Label Law Act, and it requires a manufacturer to only put 90% truth on the bottle. What that means is when we go to the store and we buy mold cleaners and mildew cleaners, what they found is there's such a negative connotation of mold that people would not buy the mold cleaner, but when it said mildew, guess what happened? More people bought it because people are afraid of mold. Does that make sense? So, as a real estate agent, you never want to use the verbiage mold and mildew, and we'll talk a little bit later on what verbiage you should use. Mold is just like a plant. In fact, before it was characterized in its own family kingdom, they thought it was a plant. There's about 300,000 different types of mold that have been identified. They are still identifying about 1 million more. They still think there's about 1 million more that they have to identify. That's a lot. Mold can be absolutely any color. It can be pink, blue, red. It pulls the pigment from its feeding source. So everyone's afraid of black mold, but it doesn't really matter what color it is. It matters what type it is. Okay, what type it is. It's estimated that 1 out of every 2 homes has mold colonizing in it somewhere. Mold is a completely natural thing. If we didn't have it, I mean, this room is filled with mold spores right now. We go outside, we breathe in mold spores constantly, all day and every day. Mold is very beneficial. Does anybody drink beer or wine in here?
Yeah.
So everybody that raised your hands and you said you don't like mold, then you're also saying, I don't like beer and I don't like wine. Right? Because molds are used to ferment beer and wine. Have you ever seen somebody that drinks one little sip of wine and their face just goes red and flush? They're having an allergic reaction to the molds that were used to ferment that wine. Now, if they're drinking the whole bottle, that's a whole nother, that's like cirrhosis or something like that. Okay, if you eat cheese, you like mold. If you eat yogurt, you like mold. So it seems like the only place we don't like to see it is in the real estate transaction, right? Also, mold is very beneficial for our environment. If we didn't have mold, our planet would be stacked with leaves and twigs. It's very beneficial. It helps regenerate the soil. So without it, we wouldn't really be able to exist. Overall, you guys, there's about 3 different types of mold. There's a toxogen, a pathogen, and there's an allergen. But overall, mold is very allergen-like. So what happens is when we have mold colonizing on a wall, it actually, just like a dandelion, have you ever seen the dandelions when they sprout and they have those little white things that fly everywhere? Yeah. And then they attempt to spread. Now, same kind of scenario when we have mold on the wall. They're sending off spores that you cannot see with your eye. And they shoot off, all the different types shoot off different types of spores, and they're called mycotoxins. Now, some molds shoot off more mycotoxins than others, and more people have allergies to those different types of mycotoxins. Okay, has anybody heard of penicillin before?
Yeah.
That's a mold.
That's a mold. Anybody allergic to penicillin in this room? I got 1, I got 2. So every time you go to the doctor's going to ask you, hey, are you allergic to penicillin? And what's interesting is what they found is for every study that comes out and says mold is linked to cancer, asthma, leukemia, autism, and all the other ailments it's accused of having, guess what? There's another college study that comes out and says, no, it's not. Why is that? Why is there so much confusion on that? It's because everybody's individual body chemistry is completely different. So one person may be allergic to penicillin, the other person may be not allergic to penicillin. It's all up to the individual and how it will affect the individual. So over the 300,000 different types of mold, it's all up to our individual body chemistry and how it will react with us. Another misconception about mold is it needs to be in this dark, damp place with no sunlight or anything like that. The interesting thing is we only need 3 things for mold to grow: air, food, and moisture. Mold actually grows in the desert, it grows underwater, and it grows in Antarctica. The desert is very sunny. So what happens is we have the sun and then it gets cold at night and then we have condensation, and that mold will sit and grow in that direct sunlight because it has all 3 things: air, food, and moisture. So that's really the only 3 ingredients that we do need. When we see mold in a transaction, what is really the cause of that? What is really causing that mold? Does anybody know?
Moisture.
Moisture, absolutely. So just like a termite inspector goes out and they see some damaged wood on the property and they see some termite droppings, is that the problem?
No.
No, it's the termites that are in the wood. So we need to take care of the termites. Same thing with mold. When we see that fuzzy stuff growing on the wall, that is not the problem. It kind of is, but you really need to address the moisture problem first to get rid of the problem. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So water is meant to be outside of our houses. Another thing is what causes moisture intrusion inside our house. Another common culprit is condensation and humidity. So back in the day, before 1970s, they used to build these bathrooms and they had no windows and they had no vents, right? What they found out is that hot air and the cold air, they mix, and then we get that condensation that forms. Well, now we have air, food, and moisture, and that's prime conditions for mold to grow, right? So right now, there's spores blowing around in this room right now. If I take a hot shower and there's no window in there and there's no vent, that hot water meeting the cold air is going to cause condensation. The condensation comes over here and it lays on the wall. Now with the mold spores blowing around in the air, now they have all the things they need: air, food, and moisture, and then now we have prime conditions for mold growth. Okay? Also, families just being in a room, all of us being in this room right now, we're sweating and we're breathing. Guess what we're doing to the humidity in this room? We're introducing a lot of moisture in this room. So everybody kind of hold your breath because we want to keep the humidity levels down in here, okay? Also, the condensation and humidity levels inside the home can maintain that mold once it's established. So sometimes properties down by the beach, we've got high humidity. So some of the clients, they have to actually make sure they're opening up their windows regularly, letting the sunlight come in, controlling that humidity level to deter mold growth. So the thing is about mold is it does need to be disclosed in the real estate transaction. Do you guys agree with that?
Yes.
You don't want to be like the real estate agent who is a real estate investor, bought a property in Los Angeles and renovated it, and then a buyer came in and then they double-ended the property. Okay, now the buyer moves in and they start having all these health effects, and they spend thousands of dollars in testing, and they actually find that they've got some spores in their lungs, which is penicillin. A mold expert comes out to the property. They find that underneath the kitchen sink, there's a massive issue. There's penicillium and aspergillus growing underneath the kitchen sink. Well, they find the source of the problem, and it's actually the main water line is broken underneath the property. It's ruined the structure, it's ruined the foundation, and then they need to tear out that the whole kitchen and rebuild it. So that buyer, guess who they wanted that to pay for?
Yeah.
The agent. So they end up suing. They get an estimate to repair all this for $110,000. That's a lot of money. And now, they say, you know what, I'm going to have some pain and suffering, so I'm going to sue for $220,000. This is not a small claims anymore. What's interesting is when she took her allergy to penicillin to an attorney, her attorney went on that agent's Facebook page, and on the agent's Facebook page, her attorney found a post. And the post said this: how do I get rid of mold in one of my listings? This is like 3 weeks before the close. Oh, bingo! They screenshot that, they take it, and now they have a pretty solid case. Now, when they sue, do you think they just sued one person? Do you think they just went after just the seller? They bring in everybody who worked on the property. So they brought in one of the contractors who actually did most of the remediation and most of the remodeling. And the contractor produced an email, and the email said this: please just paint over the stuff under the kitchen sink. And the contractor said, you know what? My client hired me. I was simply just doing what my client asked me to do by painting over it. The judge says, you know what? You're a licensed contractor in California, and you go through extensive studying on this stuff. You've lost your license in the state of California for 10 years. You also get to pay half of the fine, $110,000. Real estate agent, you've lost your license in the state of California for 10 years. You get to pay the other $110,000. Do you guys think the agent paid the $110,000? No. Who do they go after next? The broker. So they went after the broker, and the broker's like, sweet, this is why we have E&O insurance, this is going to protect us. The E&O company said, this is direct negligence and fraudulent activity. We are only covering your court cost fees for the attorneys. You will be liable for the fine. Now, what do you do as a big corporation when you get sued, a big lawsuit? What do some of them do? They appeal, or they file for bankruptcy, and then they open up a brand new corporation. Now, this is a brokerage in Orange County that this happened to. They were in business for 12 years, done thousands of transactions, and then now, a couple years ago, they just had a new grand opening with a new name. Right? So I'm not saying every time a name change happens, it's a lawsuit, but it is something that happens. So we don't want to be like this. This could have all been avoided with a small little sentence in disclosure, though. And it's right up here on the screen. Stains noted under kitchen sink. Stains noted under kitchen sink. And then let the buyer, now you've disclosed it. Now the buyer can do with that information what they would like to do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so here's a case where one of our mold inspectors went out to the property, and the gentleman answered the door in a parka in Southern California. Like, why are you? He's like, well, my wife is from Alaska, and we have 2 commercial strength air conditioners that keep the air super cold, because my wife likes it really, really cold because she's from Alaska. Well, what happened is that cold air would come out and meet the hot air, and you see around the air registers, now we have some stains growing, right? And he happened to be allergic to those. So the solution would be, you guys got to turn the air up. Now, I don't know if they got divorced or not because of that, but they did end up turning the air up to take care of the problem. Other ways, here's another case where, see these can lights up here? There was a roof leak back in '09. Were people doing a lot of repairs on their roofs? No, right? Because of the crash, nobody had money. So this roof started to leak through the can light, and it caused a mold growth. And the children in the property, they were having symptoms of allergy-like symptoms. So they went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you know what? I want you to get a humidifier, and I want you to put it in all rooms of the house and run it for 24 hours a day to help with allergy-like symptoms. So humidifiers do what to the air? They add moisture into the air. So after they kept it running, it actually ended up spreading all over the house. Do you think the symptoms of the children got better? No. We need to find the leak and fix the leak, not add a humidifier. Sometimes we see just the tip of the iceberg when we're looking at some stains on a wall. You just see a little tiny stain, but then you open up the wall and the wall cavity is filled. A lot of contractors we do see will paint over stuff like this with Kills. It's a really strong sealer. What's interesting is when they do that, is the mold reverts and it grows where? It doesn't go out, it starts growing where? Back into the cavity. Into the cavity. So that's another reason why you never want to paint over it. Here's another issue that the client kept cleaning this cabinet every 3 or 4 months. Kept cleaning it, and guess what kept coming back? The mold. Stains. You guys. But it kept coming back. And what they found is, see that window right next to the cabinets? Is that this window had a bad seal, and then sprinklers would come on, and the seal, and then the water. So instead of cleaning it every 3 months, what do you have to do? Make sure the window is sealed properly. So they end up sealing the deal, and she never had to clean it after that. Okay, let's keep going. Next slide. Another thing is, you guys, we always see, a lot of times we see patios, and this particular patio, it had no drainage. You usually want to have weed poles or something where the water can drain out. This patio was like an actual pool inside the property. It's kind of hard to see, but if you can look really close, you can see the whole siding of that property bowing. Because when it would rain, the water would fill up, and guess where it would go? Right down to the foundation and crawl up, that moisture would crawl up inside the house. Do new houses, new homes, new construction, can they have mold in them? Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, if we're building a new house and it rains on this wood, what do we now have? Air, food, and moisture. We have all the things conducive for mold growth. So some of the new homes also have it as well. So we do recommend getting an inspection if you see any symptoms to that. The interesting thing, and why mold is a deal killer in real estate transactions, is the cost of remediation is quite high. The average cost of remediation in Southern California is $21,000, around $21,000. And the process takes about 3 to 4 weeks. Is that an escrow killer? Yes. Absolutely. So another thing is, it's such an unregulated industry. You could have somebody come out and give you a handyman come and give you a quote. You could have all these other companies. It's so unregulated. So it's hard to find somebody who will do the job properly. Now there's another misconception about mold, that bleach is an effective treatment for mold. This is actually not true. Back in the 1970s, the EPA and OSHA put out a statement and said bleach was an effective treatment for mold on non-porous surfaces. So this table, that's a non-porous surface. Over here, this is a porous surface. This drywall has air holes all over in it. Okay? What everybody did is they forgot the second part of that statement. Bleach is an effective treatment for mold on a non-porous surface, and they just listen to the first part. So a lot of people will say, oh, I'll just put bleach on it, and then I'll paint over it. What you're actually doing is, what happens when we put a black shirt in the dryer with bleach? It turns white. So now you're dyeing the pigment of the mold. What color are you dyeing it? White. Bleach is 70% water. So now you're also watering it. And it's also like a dandelion. If you don't get the roots, guess what? It's going to grow back. Now I went back home about 6 months ago, and I went into my mom's bathroom, and I looked up, and this is what I saw. And I said, Mom, just curious, it looks like you have some stains going on up there. What did you use to I put bleach on a rag, and I put bleach on a rag. Now if you look closely, you can actually see the smear marks. You see that? You see this right here where it's smearing? So now she took the spores on the rag and then just planted them in different areas. And then a couple months later it grew back. So bleach is not an effective treatment for mold. If it's on a non-porous surface, it is. But if it's on a porous surface, it's not. Okay? Recently we've come across some new technology that we've seen. Now I'm not affiliated with this company, I don't own this company, but we have seen them come by after our inspections. Now what this is, it's an enzyme. This enzyme will go in and actually eat the mold. Mold has a phospholipid bilayer, there's proteins in it. This enzyme will actually go in and eat the mold. So also if we had mold inside this air cavity, it's fogged at 10 microns, it will go in there and eat the mold. It's very cost effective and it saved a lot of escrows. Okay, I'll go back. Just curious, are there any affiliates in here that handle mold remediation or mold treatment? We got this gentleman right here, and then the gentleman in the back there. So if you guys have any questions about that part of the process, talk to those two gentlemen in the black. Okay, in conclusion, you guys, mold is a symptom of water intrusion. It really should just be like the termite process. We have it disclosed. We need to get rid of the termites. We have the stains disclosed. We need to get rid of the moisture intrusion. Okay? Every single person's body chemistry reacts completely different to the 300,000 different types of mold that there are. And it's very, very important to disclose it because we don't want to leave ourselves open for liability. Does that make sense? Well, I appreciate your time today. I hope you guys learned a little bit something about mold. And the next time you drink beer or wine, please think of me. Thank you very much, everybody.